Usually when we talk about a bank robbery,
Yeah.
there's a very clear, almost cinematic image that pops into our heads.
Right, like ski masks and getaway cars.
Exactly. A breached vault, alarms blaring, bags of cash being hauled away in the dead of night. We focus entirely on the bank itself. But imagine a completely different scenario.
Okay, I'm listening.
Imagine you don't rob the bank at all. You break into the corporate headquarters of the company that builds the bank vaults. You don't steal a single dime.
Which is weird, right, for a robbery.
Right. You just quietly pick the lock to their filing room, open a dusky cabinet, and spend an unknown number of hours taking pictures of the master blueprints for every single vault they've ever installed across the country.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that is a terrifying thought.
It really is.
Mm.
And that creeping delayed dread is exactly what happened to the cybersecurity world. So today on this deep dive, our mission is to take a brief, honestly, incredibly dense corporate statement and tear it all the way down to the studs.
Yeah, we are looking at a major cybersecurity incident at a massive security firm called Trellix.
And for you listening, we are going to map out the technical mechanics of the breach, the terrifying gaps in their investigation timeline, the catastrophic supply chain risks, and really look at the underlying architecture of their crisis communications.
Because, in the cybersecurity industry, public statements like the one Trellix released are meticulously engineered. I mean,
Right.
teams of lawyers, crisis managers, forensic leads, they weigh every single syllable.
They don't just draft it in an email and hit send.
No, absolutely not. My role as we unpack this is to help you see the negative space.
The negative space.
Yeah, the deliberate omissions. What a company actively chooses not to say in the wake of a breach often reveals far more about the severity of the incident than the carefully curated facts they actually do provide.
Okay, let's unpack this. So Trellix suffered a breach resulting in unauthorized access to what they describe as a portion of its source code repository.
Right, a portion.
But the exact nature of the data that the attackers accessed remains completely undisclosed. Now, returning to our opening analogy, the thieves here didn't get into the vault. They didn't access live customer data or, personally identifiable information.
No credit card numbers, no social security numbers.
Exactly. What they got was unauthorized access to the architectural drawings, the documents showing where the digital air vents are, how the alarm wires are routed, and where the structural weak points are hidden.
And those structural weak points are the critical element there. When we talk about a source code repository at a firm like Trellix, we aren't talking about a simple static file directory.
It's not just a folder on someone's desktop.
No, not at all. A modern repository, usually operating on systems like Git, is the collaborative digital nervous system for the entire engineering organization.
Wow, okay.
It contains the raw, uncompiled logic of their software. It houses the algorithms that define how their endpoint detection actually hunts down a virus, how their network sensors quarantine malware, and crucially, how their software authenticates and updates itself.
So it's the literal instruction manual for the security guards.
Precisely. Accessing that repository means looking at the fundamental DNA of their defense mechanisms.
And it's not just the polished final product either, right? I mean, a repository is full of the messy reality of software development.
Oh, yeah. It is incredibly messy.
It contains, developer comments, rough drafts of code, testing frameworks, and sometimes, if a company is sloppy,
which happens more often than you'd think.
right, they leave hard-coded administrative credentials or API keys that developers use for quick testing and just, forgot to remove.
And that is the hidden danger of repository access. Attackers are almost always running automated scripts against stolen repositories, specifically to scrape for embedded secrets.
Like what kind of secrets?
Things like AWS access tokens, cryptographic keys, internal passwords. But beyond the secrets, what's really fascinating here is the company's deliberate use of the word portion.
Yeah, they were very specific about that.
Trellix explicitly stated that the unauthorized access was limited to a portion of its source code. From an analytical standpoint, we have to evaluate the strategic intent behind that word.
Like, are they downplaying it?
Exactly. Is it a linguistic buffer designed to prevent a mass exodus of their global client base? Or does their security information and event management telemetry, their SIME logs, actually provide hard cryptographic proof that the data exfiltration was stopped at a specific byte count?
It feels incredibly calculated, like a PR team attempting to put a tourniquet on the narrative.
That's a great way to put it.
But even a portion can be catastrophic, right? I mean, depending entirely on which specific repositories were compromised, there is a massive operational difference between different pieces of code within the same corporate ecosystem.
An astronomical difference, yeah. If we evaluate the spectrum of possibilities, the best case scenario is that the attackers accessed an archive repository for a defunct legacy tool.
Like some old feature nobody uses anymore.
Right, perhaps an old user interface component that Trellix deprecated 3 years ago. If that represents the portion, it is a reputational embarrassment. But the tactical threat to their current enterprise customers remains relatively low.
So it's basically a dormant landmine, assuming it doesn't share any underlying code libraries with their modern suite.
Which is a big assumption, honestly, as legacy code often gets recycled. But let's look at the worst case scenario.
Okay, lay it on me.
If the portion accessed includes the core detection engine of their flagship endpoint security suite, the proprietary algorithms that analyze zero-day behavioral threats, the stakes fundamentally shift.
Because now they know exactly how the traps work.
Exactly. If an advanced threat group has those blueprints, they don't deploy them immediately. They take them back to their own offline infrastructure. They set up a sandbox environment and run millions of automated simulations against the Trellix detection engine to map out its blind spots.
Wow. So they just test it until it breaks.
Yeah, they use fuzzing techniques to find exactly what memory allocation errors or logic bypasses the software fails to catch. Then they custom build new malware specifically engineered to slip through those precise undocumented cracks.
It's like having the answer key to a highly advanced placement test before you even walk into the classroom. You can reverse engineer your entire strategy based on the teacher's grading rubric.
And because Trellix has not disclosed the exact nature of the compromised data, every single chief information security officer relying on their products has to operate under a cloud of systemic uncertainty.
They just have to assume the worst.
Right, assuming the worst-case scenario until proven otherwise.
And that systemic uncertainty leads us directly into the timeline of this incident, or rather the alarming gaps in the timeline that Trellix has presented.
The timeline is where things get really concerning.
Because if the attackers were studying the blueprints, the next logical question is how long they were inside the drafting room. Here is what we know from the source material. The company stated they recently identified the compromise.
Recently identified. Very vague.
Super vague. However, they do not know who is behind the incident. And far more concerning, they do not know for how long the attackers had access to their systems.
Yeah, that is the red flag right there.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. I have to push back on this on behalf of our listeners. How does a company built on catching bad guys not know someone is walking around inside their own house?
It sounds hypocritical, right?
Totally. If Trellix has absolutely no visibility into the timeline, how can anyone trust their foundational security posture?
Well, the lack of visibility into the timeline highlights a harsh reality of modern network architecture. Intrusions by sophisticated actors are rarely loud, destructive events.
They aren't kicking down the door.
Exactly. When we discuss how long an attacker goes undetected, we look at the metric of dwell time. Industry reports, like Mandiant's annual M-Trends report, have shown that while global median dwell times have decreased over the last decade, sophisticated nation-state actors can still lurk inside environments for weeks or even months without tripping a single alarm.
Because they aren't detonating ransomware, they are acting like ghosts in the machine.
They are meticulously living off the land, as we say in the industry. During this dwell time, advanced actors don't install noisy, easily detectable malware.
So what do they do?
They compromise legitimate administrative credentials. They use built-in system tools like PowerShell to move laterally across the network. They elevate their privileges, forge Kerberos authentication tickets to bypass access controls, and slowly siphon data in small, encrypted increments.
That's a little trickle so nobody notices.
Right, to avoid triggering outbound traffic alerts.
So then they bring in forensic experts. I imagine they aren't just running a glorified antivirus scan. They have to be digging through Active Directory logs or trying to correlate network flow data from months ago, right?
Oh, the forensic recovery process is an incredibly grueling exercise in data correlation. These external incident response teams are tearing through terabytes of telemetry.
Just mountains of data.
Mountains. They are looking at endpoint detection and response logs, trying to isolate anomalous authentication requests. Did a developer's credential authenticate to the Git server from a known VPN IP address, but at a highly unusual time, like, I don't know, 3 a.m. on a Sunday?
Right, looking for the needle in the haystack.
And the nightmare scenario with an unknown dwell time is log retention. If an attacker has been in the system for 6 months, but the company's SIEM platform is configured to overwrite logs every 90 days to save on cloud storage costs.
Oh, man. then patient 0 is gone. The initial vector is permanently erased.
The digital footprints simply cease to exist. The forensic team is forced to try and reconstruct a timeline with massive, unfillable gaps.
That sounds impossible.
That level of complexity is why Trellix didn't just rely on private incident response firms. They also stated they have notified law enforcement of the matter.
And bringing in law enforcement isn't just a standard boilerplate move for a minor IT cleanup either. I mean, companies handle minor ransomware or phishing incidents internally all the time, right? It's just to avoid regulatory scrutiny and terrible press.
They do it constantly. But when a cybersecurity giant officially brings in law enforcement, which in the United States typically means the FBI's Cyber Division and the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, or CISA, it signifies a critical threshold has been crossed.
A whole different ballgame.
It implies the nature of the intrusion, the tactics, techniques, and procedures observed are sophisticated enough to warrant federal or international intelligence resources. We're almost certainly looking at an advanced persistent threat, an APT.
Who we're talking big players.
Yes. These are generally state-sponsored actors or highly organized cybercriminal syndicates with massive funding. It elevates the breach from a corporate embarrassment to an active criminal investigation with potential national security implications.
Which brings us to the apocalyptic scenario.
Let's hear it.
If we have highly sophisticated actors operating with an unknown dwell time, accessing the core blueprints of a major security platform, the implications stretch far beyond Trellix's internal network. Let's look at the company's exact wording regarding the business risk.
Okay, what do they say?
Trellix explicitly stated, quote, "Based on our investigation to date, we have found no evidence that our source code release or distribution process was affected, or that our source code has been exploited," end quote.
Yeah.
I read this and immediately think of a municipal water treatment plant.
Ah, the supply chain parallel. I like it.
Right. The water plant issues a press release saying, someone broke into our facility last night. They were walking around the purification vats. But based on our investigation to date, there is no evidence they actually poisoned the water supply.
It's technically reassuring, but
legally, that is meant to reassure the public. As a customer, as someone who has to turn on the faucet in their kitchen to make their morning coffee, you are still going to be incredibly hesitant to drink from that tap.
Oh, without a doubt. If we connect this to the bigger picture, you are talking about the mechanics of the CI/CD pipeline, continuous integration and continuous deployment.
Let's break that down for the listener.
Sure. When Trellix references their release or distribution process, they are talking about the automated pipeline that takes the raw code from that compromised repository, compiles it, signs it with a cryptographic certificate to prove it's authentic, and pushes it out to update servers globally.
Because security software has to update constantly, right?
Yeah.
The threat landscape changes daily, so these endpoints are constantly phoning home for new definitions and patches.
Exactly. And the relationship between a client's computer and the Trellix update server is built on absolute implicit trust. The client endpoint assumes that anything coming down that pipeline, carrying the official Trellix cryptographic signature, is inherently safe.
And it gets installed with deep permissions.
The highest level of system privileges. If attackers figure out a way to inject a backdoor into the source code and then manipulate that CI/CD pipeline to compile and sign that tainted code,
you end up with a SolarWinds situation.
The definitive supply chain nightmare.
For anyone who doesn't remember, that was massive.
Huge. In the SolarWinds attack, Russian intelligence didn't need to individually hack thousands of government agencies and Fortune 500 companies. They hacked the vendor. They inserted the Sunburst backdoor into the Orion software update and let SolarWinds' own trusted distribution infrastructure deliver the malware to the entire client base.
It is the most efficient, devastating way to compromise global targets simultaneously.
Truly. It's brilliant in a terrifying way.
They turn the very shield designed to protect you into the weapon that destroys you.
That is why Trellix is drawing a massive, highly visible line in the sand regarding their distribution process. They are frantically assuring the market that the CI/CD pipeline remains pure.
Right, they're saying, the intruders looked at the architectural blueprints, but we have verified the integrity of the concrete we are actively pouring.
Exactly. But that places every chief information security officer at every client company in an excruciating bind. Trust in cybersecurity is incredibly fragile.
I mean, the company just admitted they don't know who hacked them, they don't know the dwell time, and they don't know the full extent of the exfiltration.
Right.
Yet, they are asking clients to take a massive leap of faith that the update servers are completely clean. As a CISO, do you stop updating your enterprise security software, leaving your entire network vulnerable to every new zero-day vulnerability discovered tomorrow? Or do you keep pulling down updates, rolling the dice that Trellix's internal pipeline audits are completely infallible?
It is a lose-lose proposition for those clients. If you pause updates, you are failing in your fiduciary duty to protect your network from active external threats. If you continue updating and the pipeline is poisoned, you are the one who authorized the deployment of the malware.
It's an impossible choice.
It is, and this impossible situation is why the crisis communications coming out of Trellix leadership are so critical and so heavily scrutinized by the industry right now.
So what does this all mean for how they are managing the narrative? Let's look at their PR strategy.
Let's do it.
When journalists reached out for comment or clarification, a spokesperson for Trellix acknowledged the breach, but offered absolutely zero additional color. They simply pointed back to the exact same official statement posted on their website.
Very standard.
And that statement relies heavily on very specific, deeply vetted phrasing. Things like, based on our investigation to date, and a vague promise to share more information as appropriate when the investigation is complete. So I have to ask, is this rigid, almost robotic communication strategy a sign of a company stonewalling the public? Or is this just the standard operating procedure for managing SEC regulations and legal liability during a crisis?
Well, while it is incredibly frustrating for the public and the media, it is the textbook standard operating procedure for a corporation under extreme duress. Let's decode the legal architecture of that statement.
Decode away.
The phrase, based on our investigation to date, is the ultimate corporate shield.
Because it sets a strict temporal boundary on their accountability.
Precisely. It creates a legal firewall. When a publicly traded entity, or even a massive private equity-backed firm, issues a statement to date, they are establishing a factual baseline that exists only in that specific millisecond.
Right. So if things change tomorrow, they're covered.
If the forensic team discovers a catastrophic, deeply embedded backdoor in the distribution pipeline tomorrow morning, the leadership team hasn't technically committed fraud or lied to their investors today. They were simply operating on the telemetry available to date.
Wow.
It is designed to mitigate the risk of massive class action lawsuits claiming leadership intentionally misled the market.
It's the linguistic equivalent of an escape hatch. And then they use the phrase, as appropriate. The statement says they will share additional information as appropriate once its investigation is complete.
Which is a masterclass in controlling the narrative indefinitely. Because think about it, who defines the criteria for what is appropriate?
The internal legal counsel at Trellix.
Exactly. This means they are under absolutely no obligation to release a full, transparent technical postmortem if they decide the optics are just too damaging.
So we might never know the full story.
We might not. And this raises an important question about the fundamental tension in cybersecurity incident response. The clash between the industry's demand for total transparency so other companies can learn from the attack vectors and the victim company's absolute necessity to maintain operational security during an active hunt.
Because if you publish a blog post detailing exactly which servers the attackers compromised and which vulnerabilities they exploited, you are handing the attackers a real-time battle damage assessment.
You are tipping off the adversary. Let's say Trellix holds a press conference and announces, we have isolated the threat actor's activity to a legacy Git server, and we are monitoring their lateral movement via forged Kerberos tickets.
The attackers are watching that press conference?
They absolutely are, and they will instantly know their primary persistence mechanism is burned. They will immediately pivot to secondary or tertiary backdoors that the forensics team hasn't even found yet, or they will initiate destructive protocols.
Like deploying wipers to destroy logs and cover their tracks.
Exactly. Silence, particularly in the chaotic early days of an investigation, is a tactical necessity.
It's a high-wire balancing act.
Yeah.
You have to project enough competence to stop your clients from ripping your software out of their networks, but maintain enough silence that you don't burn your own forensic investigation.
It's an incredibly stressful position to be in.
But to truly grasp the gravity of this breach and why it is sending such shockwaves through the industry, we have to zoom out and look at exactly who Trellix is.
Oh, yes. The background here is crucial.
Because this isn't a scrappy Series A startup that accidentally left an Amazon S3 bucket completely open to the public. We're talking about a massive entity born from absolute cybersecurity royalty.
The pedigree of the companies involved here is what elevates this from a concerning technical failure to a systemic industry earthquake.
So let's lay out the business landscape from our sources. Trellix is currently owned by a private equity firm called Symphony Technology Group, or STG. But Trellix itself is a very new name. It was formed in January 2022.
Right, fairly recently.
And STG didn't build this company from scratch. They created Trellix by executing a massive merger of two legendary legacy companies, McAfee Enterprise and FireEye.
Two absolute titans.
Furthermore, around this exact same time, FireEye's incredibly respected incident response arm, Mandiant, was split off and sold to Google for a staggering $5.4 billion.
The historical weight of those names is immense. McAfee is foundational to the very concept of commercial antivirus software. And FireEye essentially invented the modern approach to detonating and analyzing zero-day malware in virtualized sandboxes.
They've been everywhere.
They have been on the front lines of defending against the most sophisticated nation-state cyber warfare campaigns of the last decade. The sheer scale of the $5.4 billion Mandiant acquisition by Google demonstrates the astronomical financial and geopolitical stakes involved in this specific tier of the cybersecurity sector.
So we have the combined resources, the historical data, and the engineering talent of McAfee and FireEye. How does a fortress built from those materials end up with attackers roaming around their source code repositories?
Well, if we examine the timeline you just laid out, we find a massive operational clue. Trellix was formed in January 2022 from a massive corporate merger. I want to look at the severe technical realities of merging two legacy entities like McAfee Enterprise and FireEye.
He can't be easy.
It's a nightmare. From an executive board's perspective, a merger is a financial transaction. Synergies, combined market share, unified branding. But from an IT and cybersecurity perspective, merging two massive, distinct corporate environments is an unmitigated, chaotic nightmare of tech debt.
You aren't just like updating email signatures and printing new business cards. You're trying to fuse two totally different digital ecosystems together while the business is still operating at full speed.
You are dealing with colliding Active Directory forests. You have thousands of developers from McAfee and thousands of developers from FireEye, all with different identity and access management policies, who suddenly need cross-domain access to each other's proprietary tool sets.
The logistics of that are mind-boggling.
You are attempting to integrate disparate cloud architectures, legacy on-premise hardware, and massive sprawling source code repositories.
It's the operational equivalent of trying to bolt an Airbus fuselage onto a Boeing wing while both planes are cruising at 30,000 feet.
That is a perfect analogy.
Something is going to snap.
And threat actors are acutely aware of this. Advanced persistent threats specifically target organizations undergoing massive mergers and acquisitions.
Really, they target mergers.
Oh, absolutely. They know that during the integration phase, security teams are exhausted, understaffed, and completely overwhelmed by alerts. The chaos creates inevitable blind spots.
Makes sense. Everyone is too busy putting out fires to notice someone sneaking in.
Exactly. A legacy testing server from the FireEye days might get left connected to the internet with an outdated patch because the new Trellix IT team thought it was already decommissioned. A developer might be granted temporary, highly elevated access privileges to migrate code between repositories, and those privileges are just never revoked once the migration is complete.
We call it shadow IT, the infrastructure that falls through the cracks of official oversight during massive organizational shifts.
Yes, shadow IT is a huge vulnerability. It is highly plausible that the sheer, staggering complexity of attempting to wire McAfee and FireEye together created the exact vulnerability, the cracked window that allowed these sophisticated actors to slip inside.
Because complexity is the ultimate enemy of security. When you introduce the human element, the inevitable confusion over new security protocols, the friction of integrating different corporate cultures' errors happen.
Always. And returning to the concept of dwell time, if an attacker gains initial access during the messy early days of an integration, their anomalous lateral movement might be entirely dismissed by a tired security analyst.
They just assume it's part of the merger.
Right. They think, oh, that weird Active Directory request is just a glitch from the McAfee migration. The chaos provides perfect camouflage.
Which brings up the crucial question of remediation. Because once the dust settles, they have to clean this up. When an organization of this scale realizes their repository has been compromised, what are the immediate, concrete steps they have to force their employees to take? What does that internal checklist actually look like when the alarm bells finally go off?
The immediate response has to be ruthless and comprehensive. The first step in securing a compromised repository environment is a total credential rotation.
For everyone.
Every single developer, engineer, and administrator must immediately reset their passwords and cycle their multi-factor authentication tokens. Any API keys, AWS access tokens, or cryptographic certificates that were stored anywhere near the compromised repositories must be immediately revoked and regenerated.
Just assuming they are already in the hands of the adversary.
Exactly, because you have to assume the attackers scraped every secret they could find before they were discovered.
Right. Assume the worst. So what's the next phase?
The next phase is implementing long-term architectural shifts to prevent recurrence. This means accelerating the adoption of a strict zero-trust architecture.
Zero trust. We hear that buzzword a lot.
We do, but it's vital here. In a zero-trust model, you no longer assume that a user is safe just because they have successfully logged into the corporate VPN.
So no more implicit trust.
None. Every single request to access the source code repository must be continuously authenticated and authorized based on dynamic policies, verifying not just the user's identity, but the security posture of the device they're using, their physical location, and the specific context of their request.
So if a developer logs in from an unfamiliar laptop or from a different country, access denied.
Exactly. Furthermore, they need to enforce the use of hardware-based security keys like YubiKeys for all repository access, completely eliminating the risk of phishing or credential stuffing.
Because a text message code isn't enough anymore.
Not for this level of security, no. They have to implement rigorous, automated code scanning tools that prevent developers from ever committing hard-coded secrets into the repositories in the first place.
So it scans the code before it even gets saved.
Right. The goal isn't just to kick the attackers out. It is to fundamentally rebuild the architecture so that the blast radius of any future intrusion is severely limited.
All right, we have covered an immense amount of technical and strategic ground today.
We really have. It's a dense topic.
Let's synthesize the critical takeaways for you listening. We've seen that Trellix, a major cybersecurity firm forged from the combined legacy of McAfee and FireEye, has suffered a breach exposing an undisclosed portion of their source code repository, the fundamental blueprints of their defense systems.
Right.
While the company maintains there is no evidence to date that the code has been exploited or that their critical software distribution pipeline has been tainted, essentially avoiding a catastrophic SolarWinds-style supply chain attack, the terrifying reality is that the attackers remain unidentified.
And the duration of their access is unknown.
The unknown dwell time is the critical variable that forces the entire industry to remain on high alert.
It really is.
Consequently, Trellix leadership is navigating this crisis through a highly restrictive, legally insulated communication strategy, leaning heavily on phrases that protect them from future liability, while leading forensic experts and federal law enforcement agencies attempt to piece together a fragmented digital timeline.
Which, as we discussed, is an incredibly difficult task.
Extremely. Furthermore, we've explored how the massive technical debt and operational chaos resulting from the FireEye and McAfee merger likely provided the perfect environment for advanced actors to bypass their perimeter defenses in the first place.
As we conclude this analysis, I want to leave everyone with a broader, perhaps unsettling, strategic thought to mull over.
Let's hear it.
We spend billions of dollars relying on companies like Trellix to act as the impenetrable walls guarding our digital infrastructure. We trust them to build the vaults.
Right. They are the experts.
But if a massive entity armed with the combined intelligence of FireEye and McAfee, massive private equity backing, and some of the best engineering talent in the world can have its inner sanctum breached by unknown actors, we have to confront a fundamental paradigm shift.
Which is?
Is the very concept of a secure digital perimeter now entirely obsolete?
Wow. It really forces you to question the foundation of how we build networks.
It does. If the absolute best guards in the world can be compromised within their own headquarters, the industry must accept that breach is an inevitability, not a possibility.
It's not if, but when.
Exactly. And if the fortress walls will always eventually fall, how do we completely redesign our digital ecosystems? How do we build systems, data flows, and trust models that assume the adversary has already bypassed the perimeter and is actively operating inside the network?
It takes us right back to where we started. You hire the greatest security firm on the planet to build your bank vault, only to find out someone was quietly taking pictures in their drafting room for months.
It's a sobering thought.
It really is. The targets are shifting from the endpoints to the supply chains, the tactics are growing exponentially more sophisticated, and the diagnostic waters are deeper and murkier than ever.
We're in a new era of cyber warfare.
We absolutely are. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We'll be back soon to tear down the next complex issue. Stay curious, stay vigilant, and we'll catch you next time.